Welcome to the Caregiver Reality Show, hosted by gerontologist and family caregiver expert David Levy, speaking on a topic that is not only a national problem, but an international one, and represents one of the biggest dilemmas facing us today: Alzheimer's disease and dementia. With no cure in sight and hundreds more being diagnosed weekly, Alzheimer's is more feared than cancer or heart disease. Join us as David Levy breaks it down and educates, informs, and explains useful caregiver strategies and techniques that 25 years of non-clinical family caregiving have taught him. You can listen or call in and be part of the show. 888-565-1470 to ask your questions. And now, here's David Levy.
Good evening, Boca Raton, America and the world. This is Caregiver Reality, and we're being broadcast tonight live from WWNN 1470 AM, or you can see us on CareGiverReality.com. Just click it on and push live show, and there we are in living color. This is our second week of going to the new format of an hour. We'll be on from 6:30 to 7:30. And it's always a great pleasure to have with me tonight Paul Vattiato, who is an educator, a care planner. He's an advisor to my not-for-profit, the American Association for Caregiver Education. Welcome, Paul.
Well, thank you, David. And congratulations on your 1-hour show.
All right, thank you. And in case anyone's interested, Caregiver Reality, in case you're new to the show, is a little bit of science, a little bit of human interest. It's caregiver education. It's respect and quality of life for caregivers and their loved ones. And we are known as the competent authorities for caregiving. If you've got a question, you can call us at 888-565-1470, or you can leave us a message on the caregiverreality.com website. Anyway, Paul, good evening, and what's been going on with you?
Well, it's been busy, David. Lots of things going on in the life of a caregiver. It continues, and many new things going on. I had an interesting conversation the other day. Somebody was asking me about estate planning as it applied to the work in caregiving, and also to the differences between estate planning and care planning. And if I may for a second,
Sure.
The conversation I had sort of went, when we're talking about estate planning, we're really talking about what happens when we're no longer here. We all have things, and we want the stuff. Yeah, we have stuff that we want to go to a particular person in a way that we wanted to get there. And when we die, ultimately that's what's going to happen. But in the long and short of it, it really doesn't have much to do about us when we're here.
Right.
When we are no longer working, there's a long stretch of time between when we stop working and when those estate plans come into play. And that period of time is really the period of time where perhaps things are going to apply to us. That period of time where care planning becomes important.
Kind of the third age between retirement and during your new longevity.
That new longevity, which we all hope is going to go a certain way, but in some cases it doesn't always work the way that we plan it to be. And many folks are in a planning mode. They planned for their children when they were growing up to provide for school. They were working, they put money aside for retirement. But yet when it comes to that third age, as you said, of what's going to happen if something happens to me, there really isn't a lot of thought that goes into that process, unfortunately.
Well, we have just come into living in the new longevity. And so a lot of people that were planning for their retirement over the last 30 or 40 years forgot to add in the possibility that they could have an extra 15 to cover.
And that 15 years may not necessarily be in the best of health. And That I think is really a concern as people going about looking at that kind of planning is, it's the best case scenario. It's going fishing up in the wilds, and it's traveling and doing those things that we all hope that we do.
Mm-hmm.
But all of that gets derailed if one or both of those partners take sick along the way, and now they have to address expenses and situations they're really not prepared to do.
Well, what does one do differently? Obviously, when you do estate planning, and you, as we said, you kind of allocate your stuff to where you want it to go. And but how do you think in terms of, and what do you really have to do? And I don't want to get into too much detail because this isn't a financial planning show by any means, but what is it that, what are the basics of care planning?
I think it begins really with a conversation. The basics of between a spouse and her husband or his wife as to what is it that we would want if we were to take sick. Where should it happen?
Mm-hmm.
In what manner do we want to have the children involved or not involved? And then a realistic understanding of whatever we choose, what is that actually going to cost, and from where will those dollars come? And
well, that's kind of a very different conversation than sitting down and saying, well, where are we going to retire to? What trips are we going to take? How's this all going to happen in the fantasy world of what happens after you retire? I know that lately the statistics have indicated that people that thought they were going to retire at age 65 have arrived at that date and discovered that they're in no condition to retire, either financially, emotionally, or practically, and so they're remaining at work or finding new kinds of work or reinventing themselves in their earlier 60s, recognizing that we live in a society where workers are viewed as the young coming up and not the old that are your knowledge workers. There seems to be an ageism bias in the workplace that it's going to take a while to get rid of, and in the meantime, people need to work. So I know I interrupted you. Go on back to explaining the basics of a care plan.
Well, in many cases, people choose to work because they do get a lot out of, and they enjoy what they're doing. But the reality is, with all that's happened probably in the last 10 years, many people who thought they were going to retire earlier, in reality are having to make the decision to stay on longer than what they want. Perhaps earlier in their life they looked at life insurance in case there was an early death. Some may have looked at long-term care insurance as part of the means. Many never gave it a thought, and they just never just dawned on them that they were going to do that. But those dollars are going to be there to be paid if there is that kind of a care, and that's really where the discussion has to end up, is that, okay, if we're going to stay at home, are we going to be bringing help in? Are the children going to be in support of that? And do we have enough to support the both of us during those two lifetimes? It's a tough conversation.
Sure it is. And Paul, where do you go to get good care planning?
Well, I think good care planning involves a collaborative effort. I think you're needing to be speaking to whatever advisors you may have regarding money.
Mm-hmm.
I think perhaps if you have someone who is an insurance specialist, you're going to be talking to them. I think it's a conversation you're going to be having with perhaps an elder law attorney who is really a specialist in understanding that process of aging from the legal perspective. And it's a conversation along with the children as to how they're going to participate.
Mm-hmm.
All of that sort of comes together and is woven into a tapestry of my what-if scenario, like we do hurricane planning here. We put a box together, we put it up on the shelf.
Right.
We need to do that same kind of planning of, if this happens, in the box, I have a plan of who's going to do what.
Right. That's a great idea, and I'm the firmest believer in doing that, because non-clinical care planning is what I'm all about. But just as you mentioned the hurricane, we've been 5 years since, or 6 years since Katrina, and that didn't even hit us that hard. Sandy is much fresher in our mind, but it happened to the other guys.
Yes.
And I see that there is one spinning out in the Atlantic right now, but it would seem like the attitude is, well, we'll wait and see and we'll play it last minute. And if we have to run out and buy some plywood or get a couple extra containers of water or a couple of cans of food, we'll do it when we have to. And so there are very few people, I would imagine, that really do in advance serious hurricane planning. I think there are many people that have done serious survival planning. I was on the Costco website the other day and scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and there are 135 potato meals in a big bucket that's sealable, and breakfasts and what have you. I just want to know is, how do you put away enough toilet paper? But anyway, that's a different.
But David, let me ask you a question.
What?
In all your years in the work that you do,
Yes.
how many people come to you when their hair is not on fire in the middle of a crisis?
None.
And
I can't remember the last person that came to me and said, you know, I'm not taking care of anybody yet, but I see it coming, and I know that I ought to plan for it. What do I do? With all the support groups that I've done over the last 25 years and caregivers that I've spoken to, invariably, they never line up in height order until, as you said, their hair is on fire or the circumstances have gone so astray from what they thought it would be. And one of the big problems is expectation management. People do not understand what might be happening behind their own door and their own wall if one were to have a loved one get sick. And it's not just sick, but with the scourge of Alzheimer's and related dementias, we're really seeing a problem out there that is going to be a difficult one to solve. And it looks like we're coming up to a break. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll be giving you a couple of good caregiver tips when we return, and we'll be talking about why caregivers are an endangered species.
interesting.
Very.
Hello, are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started.
Well, we're back again, and remember, that's caregiverreality.com. Click on live show. We're here on WWNN, 1470 AM, and you can call us at 888-565-1470. We'd be happy to take your call. I'm here with Paul Vattiato, a good friend who's a educator, a care planner, advisor to the American Association on Caregiver Education, and he fills in a lot of gaps. You know, last week I had some phone calls back in response to the AARP article that had indicated that there would be 90,000 fewer physicians by 2020 and 130,000 fewer physicians by 2025. I think one of the things that we need to understand is that, if you spread that around the country, 130 becomes a fairly significant amount per state. A lot of them are not generalists, or not your general practitioner or family practitioner. They're also specialists. They're getting older, they're retiring, they're tired of how the reimbursement system works. They don't necessarily want to get into the new electronics, and we'll be talking a little bit about telemedicine in a few moments. And part of the difficulty is that those that are going to medical school today don't want to become general practitioners, geriatricians, and if they do, they don't want to go out in the rural areas to serve in any event. So not only will it become a problem of amount, but it's also going to be a question of where can we expect to find them when we need them. I was reading a very interesting article in the paper the other day regarding nurse practitioners and physician assistant nurses, and how out in California they are trying to lobby the legislature to become independent practitioners. Now, obviously, the medical profession is fighting them pretty hard, but you'd be hard-pressed today to go to one of your physicians and not find a physician's assistant or a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner. And they're doing a very good job. Yes, they need to check back with the doctor, and I think even if they were independent, they're still going to send you out to specialists for referral, no different than your doctor would do. But we can see with many clinics and walk-in facilities that more and more they're being staffed by these nurse practitioner physician assistants because we just don't have the doctors to do it. And they're very conscientious. I think it's an excellent use of skilled medical knowledgeable workers, and I think they're going to be the front line for geriatric care going forward. And so it will be interesting to see what happens in California, what happens in Florida, and some other places where they are fighting to be able to open up their own independent practice. And one of the things that you may find with this group is they're willing to go into more rural areas and serve different kinds of populations that would not normally expect to see a physician coming into the community, but they will still have good care.
David, you can see that today. We had called for my wife a week ago to get an appointment with a specialist, and the first available appointment was October 1st, and we were just getting into September. So clearly that shortage is upon us right now and is only going to get worse.
I agree. Matter of fact, my wife, as long as we're talking about wives and doctor appointments, went to go see her rheumatologist who couldn't see her, but yet his physician assistant, who probably knows almost as much as he does, saw her, diagnosed what the circumstance was, and gave her the injections that she needed. And it was no different than if the doctor had been there. Now, obviously, she consulted with him and put everything in the record, but yet she was there when we needed her, and when we couldn't get to the doctor in time, or he was not available to us, that was what we were able to do. So I think going forward, you're going to see a shift in the clinical labor force as more and more nurses assume the job of being the front line of clinical care and also provide that adjunct in the doctor's office so that patients can be seen quicker and also get a level of care that that they can depend on because they know that their doctor is looking at it. Paul, one of the things I wanted to talk about was why are caregivers becoming an endangered species?
That's an interesting choice of words.
Well, I didn't use it. The choice of it came because, once again, there was a survey done this past week on why caregivers are an endangered species. And since I'm wearing my glasses, I can almost read. And they opened up with a statement that said the last part of what could be a perfect storm for caregiving is that we're coming off an extended period when people have not moved into nursing homes, and aided by the large number of boomer caregivers, they have stayed in their homes, which we expected them to do.
Sure.
But one of the points they went on to say is that the nursing home industry as a whole is laid in the doldrums, and that even if they wanted to play catch-up, the availability of funds, because right now there doesn't seem to be a bottom line economically in the nursing home industry. So the likelihood of having nursing homes become available is not going to be in front of us. And also, one of the reasons that they were saying they're becoming an endangered species is because the boomers peaked in 2010 when there were 7 caregivers for every care recipient, all right? And that was my first all right. And during the same period of time, the 80-plus population increased 79%.
Wow.
Yep. And in just 13 years, as the baby boomers age into their 80s, at least the leading edge, the decline in the caregiver support role will shift from a slow decline into a free fall. And so what are our choices? Hire more professionals, if they're available. We have discussed endlessly on this show the difficulty of finding paid professional care in the home care industry that we can really rely upon and that have been properly trained. We have great reluctance to place our loved one in a facility, and when they're asked, they don't want to be there either. And while Medicaid is obligated to pay if you don't have any more money inside of a nursing facility, it also presumes that Medicaid will be in a position to continue to fund those kinds of costs. And just to let you know that the worst states for caregivers in 2030, which is 5 years after the numbers I just gave you, Florida and Hawaii are tied. There will only be 2.9 caregivers for every care recipient in Florida or Hawaii. So, aloha. Yeah. We may be saying hello, but we're not going to be saying hello to family caregivers. What? And this is going to be very difficult. Now, I know, because we were talking earlier, you were up at your second home in Sebring this past week, and you had a very interesting conversation. Why don't you relate it?
I sure did. My neighbor across the way is part of a family business of professional movers, and he was telling me that they were recently contracted by a syndicate in Miami that bought up a large number of extended stay type of residences.
You mean like Marriott Suites kind of?
That type of a thing, sure.
Right.
And they're multi-level, and he was hired specifically to take what's in those apartments now out, put them in storage, and then they were going to paint and rehab them, and then he was going to replace the furniture. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many are in each building, but he said that there were 31 buildings that were being rehabbed, and he was saying that that's probably his next 5 to 7 years worth of work.
Okay, that's moving it out and moving it in, but it would seem that the extended stay folks, or it may not be the brand name, have some alternative uses. He just wasn't telling you this to fix it up.
No, not at all. He was saying that what they're looking to do is probably create some sort of a safe haven for our elderly population that is continuing to grow. It's a place where it might be an alternative to under their own roofs where they're no longer able to stay.
Well, it would still kind of be under their own roof, assuming that they rented it.
Yes.
And it sounds a little bit like a little bit like independent living with somebody around to make sure that they took their meds, or a little help with activities of daily living. But these are smaller, more cohesive units. They've got I guess whatever recreational facilities there are, and because they were extended stay, businessmen would use them, or people moving that didn't quite have their home ready yet. They were bigger. They typically had a living room and a couple of bedrooms and bigger bathrooms and closets. And so I guess the analogy might be to some of our earlier retirement communities, the vertical ones like the early century villages. We've seen a big change in those kinds of facilities, at least the one up on Okeechobee Boulevard in the northern or the north middle part of Palm Beach County. Over the years, the golf course has now been in disrepair, and the owners of it want to put up some more housing. Many of the folks in the individual buildings have broken the age restriction of 55 and therefore have allowed others who were under that age but needed affordable housing to come into and live there, and it has become much more of a homogeneous mix and not the retirement communities that they had originally planned for. That's not to say that other century villages are still not doing it that way, and many places that set up age-restricted retirement communities are still continuing to flourish, and we're building more and more independent and assisted living, but they're not cheap, and the amount of care one gets is somewhat limited, and the ability to manage one's day-to-day activities. I can tell you, I do a lot of support groups, and there's an awful lot of caregiving going on behind the doors and walls of independent living, just as you would expect it to be if you were living in your own home. So this is an issue that we're going to be discussing.
I also think you're going to see technology play a larger and larger role in these type of facilities, where there'll be more monitoring that will be going on. They will be able to watch over more people, and it probably will not be an assisted living as we know it today. It'll be more of an assisted living light, where they are providing safe haven and they are getting some degree of care. But again, you get down to the dollars and reimbursements. It's a tough
It's
going
going to be very tough, and we don't know what these robots, etc. But there was an interesting article this week called Telemedicine, the next big thing, and they were talking about the Florida legislature, and they said in order to expand access to doctors, they may have to begin to use a lot more telemedicine. Now, originally we envisioned telemedicine kind of being hooked up to a blood gas monitor or some kind of machine that would take care of pulse, etc. But what they're really talking about is, well, first, the big problem is insurers don't pay for it. It's not that they can't, it's just that they don't. Neither does Medicare or Florida Medicaid. So if the legislature were to authorize Medicaid to pay for telemedicine on a routine basis, there might be a domino effect where others would adopt it, assuming that there are cost savings. And there was a symposium on telemedicine recently conducted at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, and it was in hopes of gaining wider support from lawmakers and lobbyists. And one of the things is that physicians who are already engaged in telemedicine under grants or private contracts offered some very impressive results in lives and money saved. A neurologist from Mayo Clinic demonstrated how he could examine a stroke patient by video conference with another doctor or nurse at the other end of the camera. All right, imagine the benefit to family caregivers at home and loved ones if the teleconference could be done on a smartphone, an iPad, or a computer hooked up to the internet.
And take it away from the clinical. Just look at it from the family caregiving side. When you're having people who are living there and eyes and ears on the ground watching what's going on, what a tremendous benefit that would be.
Sure, and not only that, but it doesn't have to be your own doctor. We know now that when we have x-rays that have to be read at hospitals on the East Coast, they're read on the West Coast, or they're read in Hawaii, or they're read in Germany. It really doesn't make a difference. It's all digitized and can be done in a second. We're going to take our station break, and our break, if you'd like to talk to us, we're at 888-565-1470, Paul Vattiato and David Levy.
This is Health and Wealth Radio, AM 1470, WWNN Pompano Beach, and WKIS HD3, Boca Raton, Miami, Fort Lauderdale.
Hello, are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started.
Well, we're back, and remember, we're at 888-565-1470. And one of the things last week, we had announced that we're going to be having weekly drawings for respite at Arden Court if you are a caregiver for a loved one that has dementia. They will be happy to take you at either of the two facilities that are in Palm Beach, the one up on Village Boulevard and the one in Delray. But a number of folks ask me, well, exactly what is respite? And I think it would be a good idea if we kind of clarified that. Respite's the time for the family caregiver so that they can have their loved one in a safe and secure place so that they can go and get a little relief for themselves. It's not just a time to go out and do shopping, but it's time for you to go play golf, enjoy that canasta game, go to yoga, get a massage, do something that helps you improve your well-being. This is all about quality of life, and that's what respite is all about. And respite's been shown to help sustain family caregivers' health and well-being. This is a well-known fact, and obviously many of us know that when we go on vacation, even though many times we come back tireder than we left, but we enjoyed ourselves, it was a good break, and the good folks at Arden Court are giving respite every week to one lucky winner who calls in either to their phone number, 561-498-5552, or you can go to the caregiverreality.com website, and there's a sign-up page right on the live show and also on the front page, and we'll be having weekly drawings. And we would love to have one of you get in there and win, because somebody's going to win, and everybody that's dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's or related dementia deserves a day for themselves.
David, repeat the number if you will, please, and when they call that number, what should they be telling them?
It's 561-498-5552. Tell them that you are a Caregiver Reality listener and you want to put your name into next week's drawing for a day of respite. Now, when I say day of respite, that means sunrise to sunset. Obviously, they don't have extra room for your loved one to sleep there overnight, but you can leave them off as early as you want in the morning after 6:30 or 7, and return and pick them up about the same time that evening, and go with the assurance that you will be leaving your loved one in good hands. And I want to thank the Arden folks. We'll be repeating this drawing over the next 3 to 4 months, and we're hoping, and you can also have your choice. Even though you're calling into the Delray number where we've decided to consolidate it, you can have your pick of either Delray or the West Palm Beach facility.
And if they call in, they're under no obligation?
No obligation, no cost. We
Great.
Simply need a name and contact information so we can put your name in for the drawing, and we'll have the name of our first winner next week on this
Awesome.
show.
Great.
All right. I know next week you're not going to be able to be here, Paul, but we'll miss you.
I'll be listening.
All right. I want to also, before I get into the next subject, I want to come up with my caregiver tip for the moment, and that's review you and your loved one's paperwork. I cannot tell you how many people do not have up-to-date durable powers of attorney or advance directives to speak on behalf of their loved one if something happens. Everybody says, oh, but it was covered in the will. The will does you no good until your loved one passes. You have got to have documentation that will be accepted and respected at banks, financial institutions, hospitals, doctors' offices. The HIPAA rules and regulations prevent almost everybody from talking about anything that has to do with your care, your medical condition, even if you're a daughter, a son, a wife, or a significant other. And when I mention significant others, we have many in the LGB community, as well as those that have elected not to remarry but are living with someone that they care very much about. And you need to have those documents done that specifically state that you have the right to speak and hear and listen and involve yourself. I can only tell you that I had these documents done, and you've heard me mention a couple of times, I'm dealing as a long-distance caregiver with my uncle who has dementia in Philadelphia and is at assisted living. We went into his bank with documents done within the last 6 months before he really was unable to cope for himself. And we have had such a problem with the bank accepting the documents, even though they were done by a Pennsylvania attorney. It was done in accordance with Pennsylvania law, and it's an uphill battle all the way because they like it on their form. Well, if they're no longer competent, and by the way, when you sign a durable power of attorney, it means that it goes into effect immediately. You do not, unless it specifically says that it triggers against an event of incompetence, where you can no longer, normally we'd only see those with advanced directives, with medical directives that say, if I can't do this for myself, you do it. If I'm incompetent, you call the shots. And I would remind all of our listeners that anyone who has a loved one over the age of 18, that includes your kids at college, if something were to happen to them and they wind up in a strange hospital or whatever the circumstances may be, and you don't have their advanced directives, you can be mommy and daddy till the cows come home, but there may be a hospitalist at the facility that cannot talk to you because your sons and daughters are of the age where they can speak for themselves, and if you haven't made those arrangements, nobody can speak for them. I want to go on today and read the third part of the ongoing saga of Dr. David Hilfiker. I had the pleasure of speaking with him today. He is the doctor and who has been writing a blog on a continuing basis that starts out, I have Alzheimer's. And just before the show tonight, he and I spoke. I had sent him an email, and 2 weeks from tonight, he will be a call-in guest on this show. Great. And you will be able to hear from the doctor exactly what is going on. But anyway, this was his blog on Sunday, August 4th, and it's called, it's actually the last part of the week before and the new one. And he said, the specifics of my situation feel unique. But many people with mild cognitive impairment find themselves confused and anxious because of the uncertainty involved. I've written about some of these issues with mild cognitive impairment in early Alzheimer's before, and it references back to his blog. However, it seems that medical thinking about mild cognitive impairment is changing, and I've assumed that if a mild cognitive impairment is progressing, then it's really just an early phase on the inevitable way to one of the dementias. And this is certainly true much of the time. But some doctors believe that MCI may be more complicated. In some cases, they believe it may be a specific diagnosis with its own cause that may stay stable or even improve over time. If you recall last week, we were talking about that part of the brain called the dentate gyrus, and that letters in soup protein that enhances our ability to remember and recall. And this may very well be what Dr. Hilfiker is referring to. People now come to medical attention much earlier in the disease. Unfortunately, the appropriate tests, diagnostic criteria, and medical understanding have not kept up. When a person is diagnosed early in the disease, uncertainty is inevitable. This isn't a question of ignorance or incompetence, it's just the nature of the disease. Wow. My anxiety has skyrocketed. I realize that this blog is not about the neuroses of David Hilfiker, but surely there is something here that many with Alzheimer's experience. One of my readers recently emailed me. She'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2008. Recently, though, she was thoroughly retested and the results were completely normal. The previous diagnosis had been an error. Her symptoms then had been significant but temporary, caused by something else. She didn't have Alzheimer's, she wrote. The news is wonderful for me and my family, but I feel as if I've lost my moorings again. And we know that there are many different kinds of dementias, and some of them are reversible. So very luckily, this woman had hers reversed, or at least it cured itself to some degree, and then now she's lost again. She had an identity as a dementia patient, and now that's not the case. After almost a year of believing that I have Alzheimer's and now finding myself with some normal test results, what if I'm not heading for dementia? Or worse, what if my symptoms are imaginary, all in my head? Then I lose my sense of self. My identity created over so many months, accepted by friends, readers, and myself, fades away. What if I'm not who I thought I was? Wow. That is some amazing set of words. Imagine if I'm not the person that I thought I was, because maybe my dementia isn't what I think it is.
Can you imagine the caregiver?
The roller coaster that they're on?
Gosh.
Yes, I had discussed with the doctor the possibility of, after we speak with him, the possibility of speaking with his wife and seeing how she looks at this from a caregiver's perspective. And by the way, speaking of guests, next week I have on from the Area Agency on Aging, the Chief Executive Officer, Jaime Fitzgerald, and he will be telling us all about the rollout of the Medicaid option programs here in Palm Beach County, how well it's working, how successful it is, what kind of problems they may be running into, and you'll be able to hear the latest information, even though it's only been going on now for the last couple weeks, but they do have the experience of what has gone on in 4 counties further north. But the AAA, Area Agency on Aging, says grace over what happens here in Palm Beach County. Back to another caregiver tip. If you are the only caregiver for your loved one, you need to carry something in your wallet, your pocketbook, or conspicuously on yourself that indicates that if something happens to you, if you're hit by a bus, if you have to wind up in the hospital, that you have a loved one at home that may be untended to, that has no idea what's going on, that you can't just call and say, are you all right? So you need to have other contact information, your address, so that first responders, be they EMT, police, or whatever it may be, can go and check on your loved one and make sure they're safe, because you may not be in a position to say so. So you need to put that in your wallet, put it right behind your driver's license, because they always check your driver's license first. And make it clear, make it concise, and make it very obvious that you need somebody to check on your loved one. Paul?
I know as far as emergency contacts, in case of an accident, there is a place where you can go onto the Florida driver's license website and put in emergency contact information there. I wonder if they have thought that through enough to put if you are the caregiver for a loved one at home.
Great thought. I'm going to check that out, and next week I'll let our audience know. Somehow or other, we're back to another break. We'll be back in just a moment. You can reach us at 888-565-1470, or hopefully you've been watching us on CareGiverReality.com live show.
Hello, are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for themselves? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you stressed, burned out, frustrated, and don't know where to turn? Have you realized that your doctor, lawyer, and mental health professionals don't have real practical answers? You need a non-clinical family caregiver expert that the professionals turn to. You need David Levy. He is a family caregiver expert with 25 years of active experience with thousands of family caregivers. He can help you provide a better quality of life for you and your loved one. Contact David Levy at dlevy@caregivered.org. That's dlevy@caregivered.org. Or call 561-482-0086. And let's get your mental road to healing started.
Well, we're back, and I want to thank you for staying tuned and being with us. And Paul and I were just chatting while the break was on, and he wanted me to repeat because it's one of those things that you can't say often enough. If you're a spouse, a parent of a loved one, and you do not have their documentation naming you or naming somebody else in the family to be able to intervene, speak for them, and find out what's going on, you are behind the 8 ball right for openers. You may get an accommodation if the system knows you, but in this day and age, more and more we're dealing with folks that don't know us. The day of Marcus Welby is long past, and we cannot assume that our general practitioner may even have admitting privileges at the hospital that we wind up, or for that matter, is even in proximity. Accidents don't happen always in our own backyard, and you can be on a vacation, a trip, or anywhere. And so you need to be ready. You need to carry them with you. I put them on a little flash drive the size of a credit card in my wallet. I carry mine and my wife's durable powers of attorney and advance directives. And the other thing I do, on a Word document, I put in there all of our doctors, our medical conditions, and our meds. And I update that monthly, because I don't want anybody guessing about what I take, what I don't take, what I might be suffering from, so that there are enough mistakes that get made today through oversight or just omission or commission. And I want to make sure that I've given them, the EMTs, the emergency room, wherever I may be, as much information as I can, even if I can't say it for myself. I can't repeat that strenuously enough. Get it, put it on, have your attorney just download it onto a little flash drive, credit card size. You can buy them anywhere. They're probably $10 or $15, and mark it conspicuously as my documents, my health information. It sure beats that little crumpled up piece of paper where people are trying to decipher your handwriting that you think you wrote all your meds on, but you forgot to update it, and it's now 5 months old.
And that's true also with the advance directives. Even though you may have them, the second question is, are they current and are they up to date?
Right.
And that's something that needs to be done. The second thing, that besides putting it on a flash drive, also, there are some web services that will store that information on the cloud, that if you are somewhere, they can pull it directly down from the cloud. And some are a little hesitant about taking a flash drive from someone they don't know. So belt and suspenders.
I couldn't agree with you more, and we also need to recognize that still, if you're at home, you and your loved one, there's still no better place. Every EMT that comes through the front door knows to go look at the refrigerator.
Yes.
So even though you have pictures of the grandkids and the great-grandkids and your dog Sparky, you need to have a list of your meds and your conditions and your doctors conspicuously taped right on there so they can grab them. And please understand that this is for your benefit, and not having somebody have to make a mistake and do a workup on you cold. Paul, one of the things we're getting ready to do in the near future is Caregiver Boot Camp, and we really haven't explained.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why boot camp?
Well, boot camp has a connotation. When you go into the military, boot camp turns out 90-day wonders, and when you're going to the health club, boot camp on the beach or whatever it may be, is usually an intensive session where you learn a lot of things that you didn't, and you were pushed. And Caregiver Boot Camp, I thought, was a good name for it. I characterized it a couple of years ago when I started doing it, and I could really call it by a different name. I could call it Solution Solving for Caregivers Living in the New Longevity, but that's too long. All right, and Caregiver Boot Camp kind of, hits you right where you are. And some of the things that we discuss, obviously, are non-clinical family care planning, and I typically use my latest award-winning book that took the FCOA Media Award for the outstanding media document in the aging world in Florida, and it's a caregiver manual that's simple, easy to use. You can see a copy of it on our website at caregiverreality.com, and everybody that comes to Caregiver Boot Camp gets a copy to take home for themselves. I discuss gerontology and aging. Gerontology is the study of aging. I'm not a geriatrician. I don't practice aging medicine. But there's healthy aging and things that are normally expected to happen that you need to know about, and we discuss it. Then there's the planning side of elder law, which Paul just mentioned. Really good elder law attorneys come and speak, like my good friend Scott Solkoff and others who are leaders in the industry. Strategies from both myself and others who are elder care mediators on how to deal with family conflict, how to sit down and have a good family meeting, and how to head off some of those crises that you know are inevitable when you sit down with other relatives and siblings and try and see what you can do to get things worked out properly. There is support group wisdom. I usually bring one or two of my senior advisors, I call them my wisdom warriors, from a couple of my support groups who give you an insight into what goes on and issues that they're dealing with and issues that they've listened to and have heard about, and add an ingredient that almost nobody else can do. There's obviously sibling and family conflict resolution. I go through the practical problem solving and coping skills that are in the book, and by the time you leave, having had breakfast, lunch, and a late afternoon snack, you can't leave there without saying, I'm a lot smarter than I walked in the door. And in case you forgot anything, you'll find it in the manual. You can look at it at your leisure and discover exactly what it begins to take. And I can only tell you that while Paul made a very good point when I commented back that people don't come in and plan for this stuff in advance, this is a very, very good 6 to 8 hours. That sounds like, oh my God, I've killed a whole day, but not really. When you see the information and the things that you will learn and understand a little clearer, you can ask all the questions you want. The experts are there. You will leave knowing a little better that you have things a little bit more under control, and that your quality of life and the person that you're caring for will benefit from Caregiver Boot Camp.
David, is this just for newbies to the world of family caregiving, or is this really for people who sort of found themselves there?
Right. Well, this is for family caregivers, because I can tell you that the folks that show up, as I mentioned earlier, in my support groups have usually got anywhere from 2 to 3 years of active caregiving, thought they had it all figured out, and it went upside down. So you're never too old to learn, and there is no more or less appropriate time to get started. So if you see it coming, or you realize that circumstances are changing and you're going to be in a position of being a family caregiver, then it's time for you to get a better understanding, more than we can just explain here on the show. And we'll be announcing soon exactly when the next Caregiver Reality Boot Camp, Caregiver Boot Camp, will be held. And we will look forward. We try and limit it to 40 to 50 people so that everybody has a chance to be heard, to ask the questions that they need, and to have some one-on-one with the experts. And so I'm very pleased to be able to do that. And I know, Paul, you'll be there giving out some of the great advice that you have, and I'm very thankful for that. We're down to about 3 minutes, and I'm really excited, Paul, in 2 weeks to have Dr. Hilfiker on. I mean, I've been reading about him over and over. Next week we'll read the next part of his ongoing blog. But his insight into what's happening and the way he expresses himself is very eloquent.
It's captivating.
Yeah.
To have that self-analysis of what's going on as he's going through it, it's a perspective that very few people will ever have. And he's so articulate in expressing his feelings. You listen to it and you hang on every word. This is going to be an exciting interview.
I know. I'm really looking forward to it, and we may put him on for a double segment so that we get the ability to really hear what he's got to say, because I guarantee you this is a first for streaming video radio. To have, not that he hasn't spoken to many audiences, but we'll have an opportunity to ask him some real interesting questions about what he has been experiencing and the fact that he has been so willing to share it. I find that amazing. Most people run and hide, but he has said, no, I'm going to tell people about what it is that's happening to me. Maybe I can take some of the fear away. Maybe I can show them what happens to me may happen to their loved ones, so that it won't be a surprise. It will be not something that you want to see happen, but yet you'll be a little more prepared for what happens if, God forbid, it does happen to you or a loved one.
David, give an email address if people might have some questions that they would like you to bring up during that interview.
Okay, well, you can reach me at dlevy, no dots, at caregivered.org. That's caregivered.org. Or you can go to the caregiverreality.com website and you can leave a message for us, and we'll be happy to ask the good doctor anything that you'd like to know about. And I think that'll be a very exciting show and something very, very different. Paul, I want to thank you for all of your wisdom and insight and for being here today. And I look forward to having you back again on the 23rd. I know you're out at a conference next week, but somehow or other I'll try and hold the fort down and do a good job
Your
without you.
listeners are in good hands. Thank you, David.
All right, and remember, next week we've got the head of the Area Agency on Aging here in Palm Beach County, Jaime Fitzgerald, telling us all about Medicaid and what's going on with the Medicaid conversion in Palm Beach County. It will be an interesting insight, and even if you're not in Palm Beach County, what he has to say will be happening throughout the state of Florida and many, many other states in the months and years to come. So you might as well hear it here first. We're your competent authority. I thank you, Boca, America, and the world for listening. And remember, family caregiving is not my mission, it's my passion. And I want to thank you for listening. Good night.
You have been listening and watching David Levy, gerontologist and non-clinical family caregiving expert. Visit our website at caregiverreality.com and hear and see unscripted family caregiver support groups discussing all of the questions that you have wanted to ask but didn't know where to turn. Tune in again next time for more updates and special guests who bring their caregiving experience to you so that you can deal with your problems and hear how family caregiving is affecting fellow Americans just like you. The opinions expressed